Hi there, and welcome to the Case Foundation's Gear Up for Giving. We are here today with Marnie Webb, and we thank you all for tuning in. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are here every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We're thrilled to be taking your questions live. This is a fairly unstructured program. We want to invite questions from nonprofits on your social media strategy, and we already have a number of questions that are lined up, but feel free to join us in the live chat. The screen just below you. We also can receive your questions via email, so please email us at gearup@casefoundation.org. And if you're already on Twitter, which many of you we know are, please just use the hashtag #AGC and we'll be able to find your questions that way. We've really seen that this has become kind of a community each time we've done these for the last couple of weeks, and folks are participating in the chat and taking, giving each other suggestions and advice when we can't get to specific questions. So we really appreciate that. We hope that continues throughout this. And we are actually, before I introduce Marnie, which I am excited to do, I want to thank a few folks. I want to thank our partners in this, C3 Communications, the Goldhirsch Foundation, and also Flip Video. For those of you who are tuning in on the Case Foundation site, you'll see that on the right side of your screen, there is an opportunity for you to take a little survey, let us know how we're doing, and you'll have the opportunity to win both $250 for your cause as well as a Flip video camera to help do some storytelling and showcase what it is that your organization is up to. So we appreciate the folks at Flip Video for providing that, and our other partners, C3 Communications and the Goldhirsch Foundation. So without further ado, I want to introduce Marnie Webb, who is co-CEO here at TechSoup Global. We're in San Francisco today, and so thrilled that you're here. Marnie has a wealth of knowledge in nonprofit strategy and social media strategy, and she has been leading up some of the Net Squared efforts, and has been recognized with countless awards, from N10, I believe, as Social Media Person of the Year last year in 2008, one of Nonprofit Quarterly's, or Nonprofit Times, most influential nonprofit leaders. So we're thrilled to have her insight, and she'll be taking your questions throughout the next hour, so please make sure that you send them in or chat them in. But Marnie, I'm going to hand the floor over to you for just a few minutes to tell us a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing in social media, and maybe for folks that either saw your blog post on our Case Foundation website yesterday, talk a little bit about the theme there, and I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So as Kari said, I'm Marnie Webb, and I am co-CEO here at TechSoup Global. We're a 22-year-old nonprofit organization that helps other nonprofits in the US and around the world, actually, figure out how to implement technology so that they can move their own missions forward. And in my role, and in the 9 years that I've been here, I've done a lot of work helping specific organizations and movements figure out how they can access different kinds of technology to get their messages out and to really engage people with their causes and to make the kind of change that they're looking for. And some of that's been sort of inside the firewall, geeky, database driven, you need to have a data dictionary kind of work. But increasingly, more and more of that work is pointed outside of the organization. And so it's things that happen on the other side of their firewall. It is using tools like Facebook and Twitter, but also engaging in the public conversation around issues, which is sometimes different in engaging in the organizational conversation about fundraising. They're both very important things, but they do require some different tools, and sometimes they require some different sort of stance or public profile. And you have to think deliberately about how you link the two things together. So lately, the two drums that I've been banging around this have been very much about two things. One is that organizations need to think more and more how they can provide internet access to the people that they serve, and how they can provide information access to information to their community. And that means really about publishing their insights. So when you're an organization, you do a lot of work connecting the dots between different data points on the ground, and you need to engage with technology and with your community so that you're getting your information and your insights out there, so you can be pointed to when other people are talking about issues, and so that you can make sure that there's a big difference, I think, between data, which we have a lot of,
Sure.
and insights from that data. So you want to make sure that you're contributing your organizational insights into the conversation. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is to follow up on those conversations with the people that care, right? And that was the subject of the blog post that I wrote for you all. And that's really about when people give you ideas, or when they give you feedback, or whenever they participate, recognize that. Mm-hmm. I think, certainly, I know that I am trained to always add a zero to the end of any financial ask, and to always ask. And I think that we sometimes go too far with that, and we don't always engage. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that social media, the ability of organizations to publish their insights and information, and the ability of them to use organizations to use social media tools to actually engage in conversations with the people that care about their issues, and to follow up on those conversations. Mm-hmm. And when you see somebody tweeting something about your mission area, whether they're talking about you specifically or not, to go back and inform them, and give them a little bit more than they asked for is a great way to build what Clay Shirky in his book Here Comes Everybody referred to as bonding capital, deeper right. relationships with the people that already care about you.
Right. Well, that's a terrific way to, I think, set the stage for this conversation. So thank you, Marnie, and remember, please tweet in your questions using the hashtag #PoundAGC. Email your questions at gearup@casefoundation.org, or of course participate in the chat that's happening just below the screen. The first question today actually comes from the folks at the Museum of Northern Arizona. And they emailed this in a couple of days ago, and they said most of the examples we see about using social media cite causes that are pretty easy sells. They pull at your heartstrings. Network for Good's own advice is that something that tugs at the heartstrings is the number one things that you must have on your website. So if you're a museum like they are, they're saying we don't do heartstrings kind of stuff like feeding hungry children. How is it that they can help broadcast their message and help bring in people to their conversation?
Yeah, so we're a technology capacity building organization. We really have a hard time with that whole heartstring question. So it's something that is near and dear to our organizational heart, as well as this question. I think that advice is less about sort of show them the baby seals and the children, and it is much more about touch what people care about, and move them with their emotions. And I think a lot of times that is exactly what museums are engaging with, right? They're doing it in different ways, but they are moving people to some sort of greater understanding of the world around with them through what they're curating. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a matter of saying, how do you provide people more of an open door or access to that kind of a viewpoint, and not just the sort of factual, we're having an opening or a reception on these dates, you can show up and buy your tickets these times. Get out of that kind of information and give them the stories behind the art that's going up. You see on Beth Cantor's blog, she has done a lot of good work talking about how museums are using social media.
She has, absolutely.
And has a lot of terrific examples of that, in particular, from engaging with her community so that they can help select items, to doing online exhibits so that people can engage more directly and they can form a community around different pieces of the exhibit, to doing podcasts with artists or people that are supplying some of the intellectual capital to natural history museums, scientists, whatever it may be, behind the things that you're showing to your audience. So I think it is much more about that kind of a connection than it is at what we sometimes think of as the tug on your heartstrings kind of connection.
Right. So that's terrific. I hope that the folks at the Northern Arizona Museum find that helpful. Our second question from email here is how should this is a big one. How should time be prioritized for engaging in social media? This particular person that wrote in said, I'm a one-person communications department, usually have at most an hour per day to spend on both our website as well as engaging in social media. Are there one or two social media vehicles that I should definitely pay attention to? Or so why don't you take that, maybe the first part, which is that time question, and then what should folks devote maybe more time to, or is there any silver bullet?
I think you should always devote more time to listening. So I'm going to take it a little bit
that's great. Sure.
I think that you should always devote more time to listening, and you should figure out how you can listen online. And that if you just put digital listening or digital monitoring into your favorite search engine, you're bound to get a lot of good hits. N10's We Are Media resource has some fantastic resources specifically around listening, and so I think that can help give people a concrete way to start. But basically it's pay attention to what people are saying about your issue area and about your community, not just about you as an organization.
Right.
Because there are a lot of people that are probably talking about your issue area, whether you know them or not.
Exactly.
And you want to find those people and engage with those people. So I think setting up the tools that allow you to monitor the conversations that are happening online. And then what happens over time with an organization is you find out where it's best for you to contribute. And if you're dealing with limited time, let's say you have an hour a day, and that's how much time you have to work on this. If you spend a half an hour of your time listening, and then the next half hour of your time actually responding to what you've heard on the platforms of choice of the people that talked, right? So that may be in the comments of their blogs.
Sure.
It may be in Facebook or over Twitter to them. And then the next step for an organization, especially when you're dealing with scarce time, is to figure out how to pull those conversations back onto your website. And without getting too geeky, there are a lot of ways to use RSS or terrific tools like name escaping brain, Backtype, to help aggregate, or friend feed, or different things like that, to aggregate your contributions in various places on the web so that you can display them. So it doesn't become, you want to set up a situation where it's not an either or. It's not like I'm going out and commenting or I'm writing important content for my website. In fact, you're building your organization in the eyes of the people around you wherever you're doing it. I mean, just sort of one more thing about this. I think we have a mistaken notion that the way people experience our information on the web is by coming to our website and looking at it. And I think that's
not a destination anymore.
No, I think that's changing. People are aggregating the content, and the way that they're seeing your website or your content is in their reader. It looks a lot like email to them. They're treating it that way. They're scanning through it quickly. They've aggregated onto a page, like a customizable homepage, like what's available from NetVibes or Google or Yahoo, And so I think that we think maybe a little bit, we do need to get all our information on the website so we're findable, but I think we can't forget that the way people are really accessing that information is much more of a free range way, and we need to be much more free range contributors to the conversation.
Right. Terrific. And I think that's the idea of give and get. I mean, the highest form of flattery for bloggers is when somebody leaves a comment on their post. And, I think that's...
Absolutely. And I think that it's not an either or. That comment on a post can become content on your website. You can build a quick blog post saying, hey, I commented over here. Then not only are you leaving them a comment, but you're giving them some social capital by pointing to
it. And, so that's fantastic. We've got some good chat questions that are going on, so I want to take one from chat right now. For organizations that don't have good technology infrastructure or don't have steady internet access, and actually today is one Web Day, which I think we should point out, how do you think we should approach getting involved with social media?
That's such a hard question, because it's such a reality for so many organizations and in so many parts of the world. I think depending on where you are, sometimes it's a very hard question, because it's about getting the access first, and there isn't an easy answer to that. But I think that I would say if you're an organization and you don't have steady internet access, and the people you serve may not either, and your community may not either, you should look at some of the lightest weight ways of contributing to the conversation. Twitter tends to be an extremely lightweight way of contributing to the conversation. It's 140 characters, so it's lightweight in terms of the amount of content you can push out at any one time, but also in your ability to use it from a mobile phone or combine it with text messaging and other things mean that you can do that. But I I think there isn't a good answer to that question, like do these 3 things,
Right.
you know?
Right.
I think it is about figuring out what you can engage with via text messaging and then augment with your internet presence whenever you're able to be connected.
Absolutely, and actually I think that's a perfect segue to, you know, a lot of organizations are asking about SMSing and text messaging and trying to figure out the right ways, and we're actually seeing the digital divide of text users much more narrow, I think, than of you know, online users, and so, and even NetSquared hosted you know, the NetSquared Challenge that was focused on mobile applications. What are you seeing as some trends, and how are nonprofit organizations beginning to adopt some of the SMSing that?
So certainly integrating it with other tools where it's appropriate, like Twitter. So you have a little bit of a web backbone, but people can access it in lighter weight ways is one of the ways. That's a great example that's being played out in different things. Like one of the winners from NetSquared last year was Frontline SMS. Right, which is using Frontline SMS Medic, which is using text messaging SMS to help get out diagnostic information and support doctors in the field when they may not have good access, and other individuals in the field, not just doctors actually.
Sure.
That's part of the problem. Engaging in information. You know, increasingly what we're seeing is there needs to be some kind of web or database background for that someplace to help make it steady, right? So that absolutely. You are collecting information, you're making sure to send out reliable information, you're really engaging, but the gateway to all of that information is a simple cell phone, not a smartphone.
Right.
And just text messaging. It's phenomenal, actually. Most people don't know it, but you can access, I think, all of the major search engines by text messaging. You can text in your query and get a response by text. So there's a lot of potential to get information in and get it out by text messaging. I think we need to get more deliberate in thinking about it, not just in resource-constrained areas, which is where you see a lot of it, where there simply isn't another alternative.
Right.
But I think organizationally, we have to continue thinking about how we're using it. Of course, you see innovative projects like here in San Francisco. There was a project for teens around sex education that use text messaging, in part because most teens have a cell phone
access,
but it gave them an immediate way to, you know, sort of say, will this get me pregnant, you know, and get a quick answer when they need it, rather than hang on, let me go find a computer, you know, and because that's just not, even in a resource-rich area, that may not always be the right answer.
So there was a follow-up. I want to make sure that before we get too far away from the question earlier, what are some of the tools that can help me listen? So you were talking a little bit about, you know, one of the most important things is actually to be out there and listening, and you should actually invest, you know, as much, if not more, time in listening than actually providing some of the content. So can you just list some of the tools, and we'll make sure to put these up in the chat as well. So I think FriendFeed and
I think in the guest the blog post that I did, I actually also pointed to some resources around listening online, presentation that can help give you a backbone for some of those kinds of things.
Perfect. So we'll get that up on chat. Also, a link to that post.
So there's some support for that there. I think it's a case where RSS and persistent searches are your best.
And what is
friend.
RSS? Just for those who may not know.
RSS is really simple syndication, and it is essentially a way to subscribe. If a website owner has enabled this, it is a way to subscribe to that website so you receive either notifications that they have new content or the content that itself anytime new content is publishing. So sort of old model, you have a whole bunch of bookmarks, you go, you look at it, you say, is something new here? No, you go away, you come back. Kind of new model is you just subscribe to the feed, you look in your feed reader, which for analogies, think of your email application, and you look and you go, no, nothing. I can see very quickly and easily there's nothing new there, or I can see quickly and easily there is, and I'm actually not interested in it, so I'm going to delete it and go on. I think the big thing whenever you start getting into using RSS that is different, where the analogy to email breaks down, is you don't actually have to pay attention to RSS. You can ignore it, you can let it build up, you don't have to treat it the same way you treat your email inbox necessarily. It is more information coming to you. So the ability to subscribe to websites that have information that's pertinent to you is important, but you can also use that same tool to subscribe to searches. So I think going onto websites like Google like Friend Feed, like Twitter, putting in good search terms that are related to your organization. And I think it's important to actually spend some organizational time brainstorming what those search terms are and what those keywords are, and then subscribing to the search. Anytime somebody posts something new that meets your search requirements, you're going to get a notification via RSS. Right. Can be a really good way for organizations to listen, and then you can follow up and engage in the conversation. You do have to make it a practice. It's not something you can just look at once a week, because then a lot of the conversation will have passed you by, right? In a medium like Twitter, it's done, right? It's so it is something that's like a half an hour first thing in the morning, you know, get into it before you get into your day, spend a little bit of time responding, and then go on with your day, and then you can build that into more of a practice over time.
So one of the questions that we seem to think are seeing a lot is this idea of cause fatigue, and then how that's also related to social media fatigue. And I think you know, when you start thinking about RSS, you know, checking your RSS feed and checking your Twitter feed and making sure that you're, you know, keeping up with comments on your Facebook wall, there is a bit of information overload. Do you have any tips or tricks on how people might you know, manage that aspect of their time a little bit better?
I think different people have different temperaments that allow them to engage with that stuff in different ways. And I think that if you're the kind of person that has to read everything that comes into your inbox, has to make sure that you know why you followed up or not on everything that you're doing, it is actually very overwhelming. I think you have to think of it more in the river of news kind of way, right? So whenever you step into a river, you're not catching all of the water. You're not catching every molecule of water. But you definitely have the experience. You know what temperature the water is. You know how fast the river's moving. You know how deep it is. You know a lot of good stuff about it without touching every single molecule in there, right? And so whenever you subscribe to these feeds and you start increasing your subscriptions and you get more news, you have to trust that your engagement is going to tell you the temperature of the conversation, that when something is important, you're going to see it because it's going to show up over and over again, and not have to be tied into the fact that I'm going to get every single piece of information. And if there are things you want every piece of information about, really draw boxes around those things. So say like, it's about my organization's name. Anytime somebody answers my organization's name, I'm committed to responding in 24 hours, or you know what it is, separate it so you can hit that first, and then treat the others with that sort of broader perspective. Right.
Very helpful, very helpful. One of the things that a lot of nonprofits are asking is this idea of monitoring their social brand or their brand online, and what are your ideas about brand monitoring? And
you know, I think it's very important, but I think sometimes we get too caught up in terminology around it. I think really if you're a nonprofit organization and you're trying to move a specific cause forward, that's what you're actually monitoring. And you're looking to see if you've effectively, you're using social media tools to see if you've effectively engaged in conversations about your cause area. That's going to attach to your brand and to what you're doing without you worrying about it that specifically. I really genuinely believe that. That if you're out there saying you're a domestic violence organization and you're seeing somebody tweet erroneous information about statistics and you're participating, that's going to track back to you as an organization. You know, and that's going to build awareness around your issue, engagement around your issue, and the perception that you're somebody that as an organization, you're organizationally smart, you're providing people with an opportunity to have correct facts and potentially to engage in more support. And I think organizations, when you think about it narrowly in terms of my brand, it can sometimes, the reason that it gets to me sometimes is because I think that it can sometimes cause organizations to think about it in a command and control way, right? Which is how we've been taught to think about brand. Everybody use the right color of orange, use the right PowerPoint template, don't forget to say the tagline, you know, all of that kind of stuff, and that's not what's most important in this venue. That kind of
nicely packaged
traditional thinking about identity management and brand management. So a question from Twitter.
Are there any recommendations for how nonprofits can build a shared social media dashboard to listen throughout the organization? So I think this is more probably an internal...
Within a nonprofit organization?
Right, that's what it sounds like. And if this is your question on Twitter, if you can clarify whether you're talking about internally or externally, but we'll take it as internal for now.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways is actually to do some organizational work. One of the best and simplest ways is to do some organizational work about keywords, set up an RSS feed, and then set up the searches that we talked about earlier and subscribe to the RSS feeds, but then take that package of RSS feeds and make them available to the people within your organization, so that you're all standing in the same river, so to speak.
Right.
And so you're getting some sense of the same information. That doesn't mean that people can't add to that. They can individually, but you may want to start with some kind of base. If you're bigger and more sophisticated, some of the stuff that Wendy Harmon has done with Red Cross, in thinking about how you're looking at that information and propagating it in your organization is just fantastic. But that requires a pretty dedicated resource that's spending a lot of time thinking about that material and a lot of time organizing that material. I think that there are simple steps. Here's what we've subscribed to. Everybody should be looking at this stuff. Sort of the next step is then set up some sort of intranet where you actually are putting those things so that you're encouraging an internal conversation about the dialogue. The danger there is that you'll end up keeping your great conversation internal and nobody actually will be taking it externally. So you need to make sure that you're doing that. And then next is to get more sophisticated with somebody really taking it on as a practice area within your organization.
And I'm just trying to catch up here with our chat. So from the chat, are there any stats that are out there about how much all this talk about social networking produces in terms of volunteers and donations? So I guess, I'm sure that there's a lot of data that's out there, and we cover some of that on our blog and on Social Citizens, and I know that you guys cover that as well. But I do think that there's this idea of if we put a lot into our social networking strategy, what do we get out of it, and how do we make sure that we're getting increased numbers of donations and volunteers?
I think it's important to use those stats to do a reality check of what you're doing in the organization. I think not enough organizations are personally, I believe that not enough organizations are regularly practicing and reporting on these things. So I worry about the lesson people are learning from the statistics, that you end up with many, many organizations that are getting $1 each, and a few organizations are getting $200,000, and it skews. And you look at that and you go, well, I should be getting $50,000 in, right? Because you average it out in a way that doesn't actually work, because the two ends, there is no middle, right? You have the people that are practicing it at a really high level and people that are dipping their toe in the water. I think that how I encourage the organizations and efforts that I work with to approach this is actually to sit down and say, what are we trying to get as an organization by engaging in this? Are we trying to get more volunteers? Are we trying to get people to spread the word about what we're working on? Are we trying to get people to turn out on a given day to do something, like vote, for example? But there are lots of examples of that. What is it that we're trying to do? Look at the places where you could be engaging the right demographic, and think about it. Think about how you invest your organization in that, in the same way you think about a piece of collateral that you print, right? You look at a piece of collateral and you go, I'm only giving this to 50 people, so am I really going to spend $200,000 with a designer? Of course not. Right? So if you're really just trying to get people to turn out for a day, you've never done anything on the web, you really have to think about what the appropriate investment is. I think social media is more like a way to engage in long-term conversations with supporters, bring in more supporters, and get them committed. So I think it's sometimes a little bit longer term play than looking at the statistics. Like I said, I think that's valuable because it helps you do a reality check. But I think that you also have to layer in, what's my organizational experience with this? Do I already have supporters? There are so many variables that lead into that it's a little hard just to take them at face value.
Right. So we've gotten several Twitter questions, and actually this has been asked in a couple of these sessions, but the idea of crowdsourcing. And so first of all, if you could explain a little bit about what crowdsourcing is, and then what are some ways to crowdsource feedback for organizations, and have you seen any successful examples of this that nonprofits have used?
So basically, crowdsourcing is reaching to a network that's very broad and trying to get their input and opinions and help on something you're working about. So a really easy example is logo design. Maybe you can't afford a design, and there are a few websites, the names of all of which are escaping me at this particular moment.
Rocket Dog, is that one? Oh,
there's one that was like Logo Spring or something, something like that. I can't remember.
We'll find some of those also.
It just is to be illustrative, right? But you go out and you either put out 3 or 4 logos that you designed internally, you get feedback from the community, you let them vote, or more, you say, here's my parameters for a logo. I have $5,000.
Right.
I'm going to crowdsource this. I'm going to put it out into the world. You guys are going to say, here's the logo that I'm presenting to you. If I get picked as a winner, I get the $5,000. And then you also use your constituency to help you determine who the winner is. So I think it's not just getting submissions, right? You actually want to get also the opinions from other people. You want them to say, oh, I like this one and not this one. That has to be an element of having it work. We have seen some organizations use it for things like logo design or to help get more information. And you see more sophisticated projects that crowdsource, like social actions, that's crowdsourcing by providing a mechanism for all of the different sites that have volunteer opportunities up to get them out, right? That's sort of more of a technical approach than a human engineering sort of approach, you know, social engineering, I should have said, sort of approach. Than what I just described. I think it's hard to do, and you have to have a pretty robust and wide-reaching network to do it, or you have to do it on one of these websites that help you do it, like one of the logo development websites. There's an organization called PACT, P-A-C-T, that did some interesting work, and I'll find the links and send it to you all so that you can share it, that did some interesting work with using sort of a market approach to crowdsourcing that's comparable to the stock market. And there are other places where they've used a stock exchange kind of metaphor to help make decisions. So people are kind of betting on or investing in a particular problem or solution. There was also one of the Games for Change did an interesting crowdsourcing using gaming as a way to do the crowdsourcing. So the object of the game you were playing was to solve a worldwide hunger problem, right? Or a worldwide drought, or a pandemic strikes, you know? And so they set it up in a game, and people went in, and as part of the game, they were trying to solve this real social problem, right? So that's another way people are doing crowdsourcing. But I think it's pretty tough to do, like, really. Yeah.
Terrific. So turning back to our chat, what are some of the ways that, beyond Facebook and Twitter, that organizations can promote their events using social media?
Providing an easy way for people to link to your event and share it is one of the super basic things that a lot of organizations don't do. You don't want it to be like, okay, go to this link, scroll down, look under the picture of the yak, and then, you know, there's sort of the event that you should be reading. So make sure that you have a good, solid URL that describes the thing you want to promote, and not a lot else. So that's one of the, you know, more important things that organizations sometimes overlook. And the URL that people kind of aggregate around and share. I think if you're talking about offline events, I think, you know, tools like Meetup, Upcoming, Eventful, those are all places where you're broadcasting to a different audience, and depending on what you're doing, you might choose one over the other one. So for Net Squared, where we have these recurring Net Tuesdays that volunteer organizers set up in cities around the world, we use Meetup as a terrific way to do that, because it allows people to say, one, they're recurring, that's what Meetup is sort of set up around. Two, it gives you an easy way for other people to spawn a local event. But for things that we do that are much more one-time, we own and control, we tend to use things like Upcoming and Eventful as a way to help get that. But you know, really just making it something that your constituency can share, encouraging them to share it, and having a good link to track back to is one of the best things that you can do.
Right. That's great.
And radio. Radio maintains a terrific way in huge parts of the world to get the word out.
Very good. So we actually have several questions that have been coming in about Facebook and causes and the effective uses of each. And for those of you who are tuning in, I want to note that we're actually going to have Sarah Koch from Facebook Causes next week, who's going to be focused really primarily on how to use that platform and to answer some of those questions in more detail. So so you'll stay tuned for that, we hope. But one question that just came in via email with regard to this is an organization we run. Actually, we run 9 inner city public schools in New York City. We're considering starting a Facebook group. Should we start one large group for students, alums, and board members, or should we segregate those because of the different interests and demographics? And then they also said, we could also have each school have their own student group. Do you have any advice on how to? That's really a tough.
Yeah. I'm gonna give you the typical consultant answer, right? It depends, because I think it depends on what your goals are. Mm-hmm. If your goal is to connect people across schools, then you have to set something up that crosses the school demographic. So you might use something like current students or alums or teachers as a way to divide up your audience. But if you want it to be about all of the people within one school to be able to provide more information for each other, mm-hmm. probably needs to be school-based. I don't think you have to start just one, though. You might have something where you actually do want the schools to have and manage their own, so they're getting deeper connections with the people that are a part of that school. Sure. And are only interested in that. But then as the umbrella organization, you actually may want to set something up that helps you monitor and provide sort of the connective tissue between what's going on in those different schools, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So without knowing what the resources are, if that's actually the approach I would take, right? Is to have the schools set up a school one, give them some rules and guidelines for doing it, and then I would have somebody in the umbrella organization setting one up for the network of schools, mm-hmm. and then somebody committed to saying, hey, an interesting thing happened over here, and surfacing that, right? So that you're using it to cross-pollinate ideas and help make the connections between people. Right. But if you don't have the umbrella organization, doesn't have the resources to do that cross-pollination, mm-hmm. and pay that kind of attention, mm-hmm. you should keep it focused probably on the local schools.
Terrific. So hopefully folks in New York, that helped answer your question a bit. Another question turning to email, and we encourage you, if you have questions that are too lengthy you think to put in the chat, email us at gearup@casefoundation.org, but continue the conversation below the screen. We love to hear your questions via that, and then also if you're on Twitter, go ahead and use the hashtag #AGC. So we're trying to get to as many of these as possible. We've got about 25 minutes left. So here's another one from email, and this is something I think that's come up in several of these sessions, the idea of personal and professional. And this person said that they're having a hard time keeping up with all of their different accounts, and and then the personal and professional things that they're doing with them. How do you manage multiple social media outlets, and then how do you strike that balance between sharing if your boss is going to maybe see it on Facebook or elsewhere?
So I should go get one of our employees to answer that question. Maybe. But I think that, again, remember that the way that most people experience a web is through a search box, whether mm-hmm. it's on Facebook, mm-hmm. whether it's Facebook's search box or Google's or Bing's mm-hmm. or friend feeds or whatever. So you may be, I just want to caution folks that they may be spending a lot of effort segmenting their work, and somebody brings it all together by searching on your name. Right? So you do have to think about how you're going to get found and seen. So I just to put that out there, I see different. I think there's 2 answers to that question. One is, what is the organization comfortable with? How comfortable are you as an organization having your organizational messages about events or other things? Mm-hmm. Maybe you have employees. We certainly have this. You have employees, or you have people that are working for you that are involved in many things, right? Sure. They're doing a theater event next Tuesday, whatever it is they're doing, and they're tweeting out, giving gurus information about a chat session mm-hmm. with one of their coworkers, and right after that, they're tweeting out something that they're doing in a different venue, right, in a different part of your life. Right. So I think that before you ask your employees to engage, you do have to sit down as an organization and think, what's our comfort level mm-hmm. with this? Do we mm-hmm. want to segment this? You see a lot of people doing things like Holly Ross from N10 is doing, where her organizational name is part of her Twitter handle, and it's part of how you identify her. And you know, she's pretty clear about that. And she may bring personal things into there. We may know things about, you know, Holly's love of bacon, right, because of that. But we don't.
We'll learn more about that on Thursday.
Yeah, you can ask her
she's
about the bacon
guru,
salt.
so yeah.
There you go. You can certainly learn more things about that. But that's not what it's there primarily, and everybody knows that the rest is, you know, if you're a sports fan, sort of color commentary, right? That fills out the scene. And then you have other people that have talked about, okay, I'm going to be professional sort of on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm going to set it up privately, and I'm going to limit it to really my friends and family, really, in real life, those people. And so they do more work segmenting the network and building walls around certain parts of themselves. So I think the first thing is organizationally, what do we want to have happen? Do we want to have a policy that we're pushing out? You know, and then the second thing is just at the individual level, making sure that you're thinking through, if somebody searches on my name, are they bringing together what I've pushed apart, and if not, how do I help with that? And I think most people, you know, in practice, most people that you're engaging with that are using social media outside of your organization probably are mixing the two things together. And it is a conversation, just the same way it might be at a conference, networking event, right? And you have to think about how to manage that and what's appropriate. And mostly folks see that from the outside. So I think we tend to worry about it more than it's a real worry. Yeah.
Okay, that's terrific. So turning back to the chat now. Here's a question. I understand that the more people or organizations that you follow on Twitter, the more followers you're likely to have. But I don't really want to follow every Tom, Dick, and Harry. So is there any way around this, and how can you participate? And I guess this person is particularly focused on the Twitter community, but what are some ways?
I think it depends on what your goal is, right? Is your goal on Twitter to amass the most followers? Well, then you pretty much are going to have to go in and just work the percentages and follow everybody you can follow. But increasingly, I'll tell you that if I see somebody with a huge number of, that is following an enormous number of people, they're not following very many people. They are following a huge number of people. There aren't very many people following them. Like the numbers are way off. Like I'm following 5,000 people, 2 people are following me, you know, kind of thing. And they have not tweeted anything. Or they have only a very few tweets. That's not a very valuable account to me, because I'm following people because I want information about them. So I think the way around all of the followers is to have a good short bio on your Twitter page, links to your organization, so that people see who you really are as an organization, right? And the second thing is to have a body of tweets that demonstrates who you are and what you care about, and follow the people you participate in conversations with. And then I think that the last thing I'll say about this is very, you know, Twitter very much the sort of metaphor I used earlier, and it's used many places on the web, about the sort of, it's about stepping into a river of information. Twitter is very much that river approach. You're not supposed to follow every, you know, you don't treat it like your email from people inside your organization, where you have to read every 140 character message and think about it. Scan it, sort of trust the process, know the few people that you want to really pay attention to, and make sure you have a mechanism for paying attention to those folks. And a lot of the tools, like TweetDeck, for example, allow you to do that, and helping you segment out, here's the big stream, and here are the 30 or 40 people that I really want to make sure I pay attention to.
Very helpful. And the chat is kind of heating up now. There's, let's see, which one should we take now? So there's a question about setting directives around social media, guidelines, and for an organization. And you know, I guess this particular individual says many employees are on there and using social media. We're happy that they're promoting the things that we're doing, but now you know we have to take a step back, and it feels like we should set some guidelines. What do you think, and what's the process that you would help an organization?
So again, I think that you have to think about really what do you need to do here as an organization. If you're working with you know, what you're doing is about the safety of your constituency, right? And there's or health information, very, very personal information, credit card information about your donors. You should have a very clear policy that says don't share that information, social media or not, right? You don't want people spouting that information off at a party or to their friend or in any mechanism, right? So one, look at the policies you already have. You may have addressed some of your biggest concerns. What do we keep confidential? If you haven't addressed those broadly, you should consider addressing them. And then just apply that rule to social media, and know that whether we develop a policy or not, I mean, we have 170 staff. whether we have a policy or not, our staff is probably talking at some point about their work.
Right. Right.
And what they care about and what they're doing. So we try and concentrate rather on here's how we want you to use Facebook, or here's what you can share and don't share. We concentrate on this is confidential information. We don't share it, period. In any way. Funder asks us for that, a corporate donor partner asks us for that, we don't give it to them. So we have clear boundaries around what we consider to be confidential information. And then when we want people to tweet or Facebook or do something like that to some message, we actually just send a message around and let people grab it and share it if they are moved to do it. We actually don't require folks to share it in that mechanism. I think that, on the HR side, one of the things that I worry a little bit about is you have people that are living out some part of their personal lives in these venues, and you need to be careful that you're not setting up a policy where you're saying if you're on Facebook, you have to let me be your friend. So that I can make sure you're saying the right thing. You can't do that realistically. So.
Several questions have come in via email around video storytelling and sharing, and I'm wondering if you're seeing any trends in nonprofit organizations who are starting to use video, and I think you're doing some things with Flip that you've just announced. So what are some of the trends, and how can organizations most effectively start telling their story via video?
Yeah, so small commercial moment. We are on September 30th, which is a Wednesday, we're starting a digital storytelling event that's going to have a series of webinars. We're bringing in different experts that are working with Flip, but also other tools out in the field to talk about how organizations can effectively use this medium. I think that the technology, like many things, the technology isn't actually the issue around video. It's actually thinking about the story of a message that you want to get across, and then thinking about how you can use video as a part of that. I think that one of the best things that video can provide a lot of organizations with very low resources and things like the Flip camera, but also the video that's on many cell phones and digital cameras. Don't think you're going to produce something of super high quality with those devices, right? Like you're in lighting like we are in this room using a small handheld camera. It's not going to look like a professionally published piece. It's not. So make sure that you're concentrating on getting authentic voices and stories. And I think that encouraging the people that you're working with to submit their stories. I was talking earlier about how do you provide, as an organization, how do you provide information back to the community? I think using video to storytell. A person from the museum that said before, but we don't have the touchy-feely heartstring stuff. But if you can talk about how somebody was moved or how they learned something because of an exhibit, I think that's a great thing to capture in a 2-minute video and get that out there. I think just collect as many assets as you can, photographs and video and things like that. Then when you get to a place where you have budget or you have need, you can put that together into a really nice story if you're collecting some of it along the way. There's an organization in San Francisco called the Center for Digital Storytelling that also does a lot of work about how you can think about this as a program area. Worked in the past with domestic violence organizations that use digital storytelling with youth and with people that had been through some sort of crisis, at a later spot, so that they could tell their stories. So I think you can also use it programmatically.
Great. From chat, this question came up a little bit earlier. I have followers, but it's hard to get them engaged. I ask for input, I ask questions, but haven't gotten much participation yet. What are some other ways that I can help bring people into the conversation?
Yeah, one way is, this is where I think search terms can be a better way to find people to follow than just necessarily the people that have followed you. So depending on the Twitter tools you're using, actually just if you go to your Twitter page on the web, you can go on and run a search, and then you can save the search. There's actually a way you can save it, and then you can go back and you can click on those search terms. And then when you see people talking about that saved search issue, contribute to the conversation. I think that it's a give then get thing. So whenever you're asking for feedback, you're asking people to give something to you, and I think the best way to get them to do that is to give something to them first. So whenever you see a great tweet that somebody's done, retweet it. Do those kinds of things so that you're contributing to their social capital. Then whenever you've done that for a while, when you turn around and say, hey, what do you think about this, you're going to start to get more of a response. The other thing, and I talked about this some in the post that I did for you all, is whenever you ask for their feedback, connect the dots for them and show them how it was used. So show them that it changed something you did, and that's going to help you get more feedback the next time. So it's a process that you build over time.
That's terrific advice, and I think that's that exchange and helping people really understand how you're using that is takes it to that next level. So
absolutely.
So there was a follow-up. People want to know if the Flip webinars are going to be available. Are you doing webinars, or how is this information going to be shared?
So the hashtag for this is pound TSDIGS, pound TSDIGS, right? TechSoup Digital Storytelling. But so pound TSDIGS, and you can find links to it. If you just ran that on Twitter or something else, you can find links to it. I can send you a link to our landing page that provides people with more information. We're doing webinars that you can sign up for whenever we do webinars. We also record them so that people can see them later. We're having online conversations, a bunch of activity around it. So.
Great. So we'll make sure to get that out as well. So actually this morning was very exciting for the Case Foundation. We finally publicly announced that we are going to be doing America's Giving Challenge again. And we're partnering with Causes on Facebook and Parade Magazine, and starting October 7th, all nonprofit organizations will be able to participate and to help bring their donors and their social networks together around causes that they care about. And there will be monetary prizes, $50,000 being the top prize. But I think this series, Gear Up for Giving, has really been an opportunity to move us toward helping nonprofits feel more comfortable about using these tools. And I think as we were walking over here this morning, you had said it's not a matter of organizations are using the tool. It's no longer a question of whether or not they're using them. They're using them, and now we need to figure out how to use them effectively. And so, for fundraising, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in social media fundraising, and how people might use these tools to attract donors, but also we talk about fundraising and friend-raising, and I think that those go hand in hand. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I think that it's hard, because in most situations you'd never just walk up to somebody in a social environment, even a professional network environment, and say, "Hi, can I have $10?" You're both there for the same reason. You care about the same things, right? But you just wouldn't do that. Though you might get their name so that you can follow up with them and ask about it. I think that you need to approach some of these things the same way. I think the biggest thing that we see is that organizations don't do enough work building their network. And by that I mean getting names on their list, getting people to sign up, providing information, proving the value that the organization has in that network. So if you have people that have signed up on Facebook as part of your cause, for example, one of the things that happens is that comes into their stream, and they have an opportunity to promote that cause to other people. And what they're doing, we were talking about organizational brand earlier, what they're doing is they're building their personal brand, right? They're saying, this is what I care about. These are the movies that define me. These are the causes that define me, right? That's what they're trying to do. So you want to help and give them good ways to do that, give them information that they're willing to share, and make sure that some of that information is fundraising requests, but not all of that information. I don't have like a ratio I walk around with in my head, like it should be 60% fundraising, 40% non-fundraising. Right. And you might have somebody that's done the detailed work to say this is how you can think about the breakdown. But I think that when we look at a cause, we do get a sense like all you're doing is asking me for money. You never ask me to do anything else. You never reach out to me for any other reason. Right. I think you don't want to be that organization that's making people feel that way. You want to really engage people and give them more than one entry point, not just money. I think that you do, though, for the sustainability of your organization, you need to be thinking about how are you turning the fundraising into fundraising. Absolutely. I think a lot of that on social media may have a longer time frame. I don't know. Look at the normal life cycle of your donors. How long between acquiring a name and getting money do you have? Is it immediate, or does it take a longer period of time to do it? And then apply something of that same time frame to your social media and think, okay, if you sign up to be my friend on day one, I think that's going to convert to a donation on average in a year, or whatever your normal numbers are. Also recognize that sometimes you may be skewing a little bit. Look at the demographics. There's a lot of good. If you put in any tool and and the word demographics, so Facebook demographics, you'll get good reports on how old people are. Think about, does that match the profile of your average giver, or are you going into a new audience? So that you might add some time for that
looking
reason.
At some of that, very, very helpful. So questions about the, social media is here to stay, right? I mean, there's
I
really,
hope so.
yeah. So what are you seeing as kind of the next big thing? What should people be paying attention to? There was a question about, we're spending some time on MySpace, but it seems like people really aren't using that anymore. Is that, should we waste our time is what they say, but, what are some of the things that we're seeing, and how do we keep up, and what would you suggest?
So I think there was recently a great article that was done by a woman named Dana Boyd, and again, I'll give you the link so that you can share this, that talked about the digital divide between the different social networking tools, and this perception that people are moving from MySpace to Facebook. In fact, numbers say that's not true. What's happening is that certain of our demographics are moving from one tool or the other. So you tend to see that Facebook tends to be more affluent, more educated. It's starting to skew older. And MySpace may be more urban and has tends to have more racial diversity, and a few other statistics that she points out. So we're seeing this, what we would traditionally ascribe to a digital divide, like the people that are connected and the people that aren't connected, are starting to play out in social networks, just like they do in real life, right? I mean, you get clicks and circles, and people go to different places, and you look around and you go, gosh, all these people look kind of like me. I think the thing in terms of trends, one of the things that's always worried me about social media is I think it's a great way to find more people that think like I do. These persistent search things one of the things that I encourage organizations to do is try and put in persistent search terms that will show you the people that disagree with you. Follow them and talk to them too. But also, if I'm using something that says, show me all the other people that also like Mad Men, or whose favorite movie is Cabaret, or whatever it is, gosh, they're probably going to be my age and have my relative demographics, and a whole bunch of other things are going to be, comparable, right? And we have a lot of tools that help us find people like us. And I think as nonprofit organizations, we have to be deliberately trying to connect different audiences. So we have to provide some of the connective tissue between those demographic groups. The way we've traditionally done it is the donors and then the people that we serve. I think social media may give us a richer way to help cross-pollinate those different groups. Because in many instances, the people we serve aren't our donors, right? They fall out into, not always, museums may be a kind of example of that. A lot of affinity groups or alumni groups also are counterexamples to that. But a lot of organizations working on deep social problems have two distinct audiences. And so I think that you have to think about that as an organization and be wary of those trends where you're just sort of saying, nobody's on MySpace anymore, everybody's moving to Facebook. Really? Or is it just the people you know? Right. And do you need to be reaching out more broader than that? And should you be continuing some sort of organizational presence? Because one group is actually the people that you serve, or people that you want to be engaged with you for different reasons. The next thing is what trends that I'm seeing. I think the biggest thing, and this is where sort of my somewhat geeky nature may come out, is that we still
embrace that.
Good. Is that we're getting to a place where I think the user is the center point of the web is not the organization anymore, or the blogger, the publisher of content, but it's actually the person that's using the content, and the blur between what the consumer sort of and the producer is blurring. And I don't mean in the let's set up our website so we can have user generated content kind of way, right? I mean what I was talking about earlier, like you spend a lot of time on your web design. Gosh, we do, right? And we should spend more time. Anybody's been to our site. We should spend more time on our web design. But in fact, people bust that up by using the search engine. They bust up all of our carefully planned, this is how you get from this point to this point, by coming in and using a search engine, by subscribing to things and aggregating their subscription of our site. They're probably seeing N10's information, Idealware's information, and our information all together. Right, in their reader, even though we've designed our sites differently and we have different audiences, but in terms of design, they're looking at it with the exact same framework, right? And so I think that you have to think more about how are you, yes, we still have to have our design, it still has to be good, we still have to give people a way to navigate our site, but we have to be conscious of the fact that the web is starting to orient around the user, not around the domain name. Right? So it's not orienting around TechSoup.org, but you. Right. right? And you're saying, I don't want all of your information, TechSoup.org. I only want this piece of information. And I'm going to mix it with this other stuff. And by the way, I want to use OpenID because I want a single sign-on every place, and I don't want to have to trust you. You know, with my valuable password information. I want to control more of my identity. So I'm going to even start to break that, you know, that apart. And so I think you have to think about actually enabling that, letting stuff flow apart, and then figuring out how do you pick the best of what, when it goes out there and it happens, how do you pick the best of it and start to pull it back, you know, so that you are aggregating it in a central place for people that want a deeper engagement, where they really want to engage with you and not just your information.
That's fantastic. So I actually got the 2-minute warning about 2 minutes ago.
Oh, sorry.
But that's quite all right. I think this is an important question to spend some time on. Marnie, thank you. Thank you to TechSoup Global for providing us the space to be able to do this morning. You know, we really appreciate this. Just to those of you who are still with us, thank you so much for participating. Again, we're here every Tuesday and Thursday. I'll be back here actually up in Portland on Thursday with Holly Ross from N10. So we're very excited about that. And then next week we have Sarah Koch from Causes on Facebook, and then we also, Beth Cantor will be closing out our session. So very excited for that. And we thank you again. Continue to send in your questions using the hashtag #AGC or via email, gearup@casefoundation.org. We'll make sure to get those next time around. But once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you back here on Thursday. Thanks, Marnie.
Thank you. Thanks.